such a time as this.
And welcome back to For Such a Time as This. I am your host, Pastor James Pittman, the place where there is no such thing as a silent witness. Well, you all are familiar with George. We had him on last week, had some really good feedback on the interview we did. His book, From Queer to Christ, I've seen, well, a lot of our listeners are actually tuning into it. Some have actually told me they've bought it, they've ordered it, George, and it's on the way to their house, and they can't wait to read it. We're back again with George. Welcome, George. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me back.
On For Such a Time as This. All right, so there's an article that we have on our Facebook page. It's from the Christian Post, and it's an article dealing with John Ortberg, who is a pastor of a megachurch. And it says that John Ortberg allowed a volunteer who was attracted to children, who was attracted to minors, to work with children at his church. And so the question would be, one, is that appropriate? And two, is there such thing as an unhealthy level of, shall we say, pedophilia in the homosexual community? And so who better to talk about these issues than George? George, one, how do you see this? You read the article. We talked briefly before the show. What is your reaction to the article overall? And then I'll have some more specific questions.
Well, I applaud the gentleman who admitted that he was struggling with this area. I think it was the pastor's duty to really be more diligent and following up and maybe making sure that he was supervised, or that there were always two people in the room whenever it was around children, or had cameras in there, and laid some ground rules. I think it's a little naive to have somebody admit that and then you just knowingly trust them. So I think a little more diligence should have played into this.
Yeah, I think even if someone doesn't admit those types of things, churches should have some built-in barriers, some built-in precautions with that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's one thing. But now here's the second issue, or the second topic. How prevalent is the desire, or is the want for pedophilia? Is it high in the homosexual community? Is it higher than the heterosexual community? What say ye?
I've seen enough programs. I don't think it's higher in either community.
Okay.
I'll tell you why. There are a lot of female pastors female teachers who have recently been busted having sex with their underage students, both lesbians and with who've done it with the females, and females who've had sex with male students who are underage. Sure. The hypocrisy of society is that when a man has sex with an underage female, they lose their absolute minds. Yeah. But when a female teacher has sex with an underage male student, the men will say, "Oh, that's a hot babe. I wished I'd had someone like that when I was in school." It's still wrong. It's against the law. Yeah. And rape is rape, molestation, whatever it is. And so I think there's no foolproof way to protect kids other than, like you say, cameras, or making sure two people are around at all time, or the parents sit down and talk to their kids about it if they are old enough to understand it, to say, "Hey, if someone approaches you in such a way, I want you to tell me, but you run or go get help or something." There needs to be a dialogue about this, but I don't think you can really ever find a foolproof way to protect children unless you just have two or more people around at all times, or cameras all over the nursery or in the school rooms.
And in the article, it wasn't necessarily, and I want to be clear about this, it wasn't that the person said they struggled with homosexuality. The person said they struggled with pedophilia.
Yeah.
That's what they said. Then that's a different.
It's a whole different thing.
That's a different type of attraction for an adult to say that they are attracted to children. That's a problem.
Well, understand, and I don't know if you and I discussed this, but I have said this in other interviews. I've been warning for months that pedophilia is coming. They'll do it under the guise of minor attracted persons. That's how they're going to clean it up. It's going to
Minor
be,
attracted persons?
yeah, so it'll be called MAP, M-A-P, minor attracted persons, and they're going to throw it under the LGBT rainbow.
No kidding. You mean they're going to openly admit to that?
They're already pushing it in some ways, and there are articles out about that. Oh yeah, they're slowly having to they're slowly having to introduce this because this is going to be a hard pill for America to swallow. But you see what has already happened with transgenderism.
Right.
They have beaten the American people down to the point of where they are exhausted, and they're just like, whatever. And they will push pedophilia. And I've been warning, and they're open about it. So it has nothing to do with homosexuality. Look at the bigger picture. When you have heterosexuals and homosexual, it doesn't matter about your orientation. An individual who's just attracted to kids, to legalize it, you got to throw it under something, because if they can throw it under the LGBTQ umbrella, as we know, anyone who criticizes that community is already being silenced or fined or threatened or being harassed. And if they can put it under that umbrella as well, you will be forced to accept it. It is coming, and I just can't get people to understand that.
You know what? It's so hard to wrap my mind around this, that they would actually do this. But you know what? In 2015, when I found out that they were putting boys and girls locker rooms because of the transgender issue, I had a problem wrapping my mind around that. Mm-hmm. But you're saying the next thing coming around the corner is to accept pedophilia.
It's going to be pushed. And I'll give you something else there that eventually will come out. There's a new thing called, I hope I pronounced the word correctly, polyamory. Have you heard of that?
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of that.
And that is starting to become popular as well. And
explain what that is, George, for our listeners.
It's, for instance, if there's a woman who has 3 or 4 live-in partners, and they all agree that they can have open sexual relationships with anyone. I mean, there are instances where a woman may be pregnant and she's got 3 or 4 men living with her, but they all are the new family. They're taking care of this child and raising it. I think anything that goes against what God says about marriage, male and female, in a committed monogamous relationship, and they're married, anything outside of that is going to be normalized, and they're going to shut Christians up.
But George, even the polyamory, because you know what, for some reason I got that twisted with something else. But yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Oh, now. Polygamy,
or it's not polygamy. Marriage? It was something else. But
okay,
that's one thing. You can still, even though it's evil, you can still make that argument that consenting adults. But when you start to legalize the attraction to children, to me, even that's another line. That, boy, if America goes down that road, the prayer of Christians have to be, Lord, stop this, please. Take this country out if you have to.
Well, if I remember correctly, Trudeau has now, in Canada, already lowered the legal consent for anal sex down to 16. I'm telling you, I can't even go down the rabbit hole of the laws that are being passed around the world. I think the toughest part about it is that Christians are in the way in America, and they have got to silence us, sue us, shut us up, destroy us into oblivion so they can legalize all of this stuff.
This is demonic.
Mm-hmm. And then the sad thing is you have Christians who are lukewarm. They're apathetic. They're so busy being woke. They're so busy worried about what their reputation is going to be. They don't have the guts and the backbone to stand up to this. They've become so desensitized to it that this stuff doesn't even faze them anymore. And that's why they will succeed in getting it done.
And think about this.
Gutless cowards in the Christian community.
Yeah. And think about this. If you won't stand against LGBTQ, and you don't have the biblical backbone and the biblical foundation to stand against that, really, what leg do you have to stand on to go against pedophilia?
Right. And I want to make it sure my disdain is not towards the individual who's in that life, because God loves them and he is still rooting for them, hoping they will come to know Christ and repent and come out of that life. When you hear the venom in my voice, it's the agenda, because I know that not only hurting the LGBT individual, but I know the kids are going to suffer as a result of it.
Yeah.
And parents just sit around like, oh, this is cute. There was even a drag queen. I don't know if you heard this, but she came out, or he, and it was actually saying to parents, why do you think this is okay? Because he was being very honest about, in the drag world, behind the scenes, you have the drugs, the sex, and all of the debauchery that's going on. And he's saying, parents, this is not something you want your kids to look up to. And I can't believe he hasn't received a lot of backlash from the LGBT.
Yeah, send me that link. Please, okay. Please send me that link. But I think it's ludicrous when you have drag. First of all, the whole drag queen story hour in libraries is ludicrous and evil. But then when you have parents
who take their kids
there, not only take their kids there, but allow their kids to wrestle with the drag queen on the floor and have the child on top the man, have the man on top of the child. That is...
You know why we're here and why that's...
What are you thinking?
Right. That shows you the state of decay of our morals.
Yep.
And, instead of the Christians and the church taking charge and showing America, leading them in the right direction, they've acquiesced and they've become lukewarm and they've become cowards and they've let society dictate to them how they should be led. And that's the problem we have.
So we are to watch out for the next LGBTQ+, but we're saying the plus is the pedophilia coming around the corner. George, last word as we close out.
Okay.
Last word. Do you have any last word or whatever?
Not at the moment, but
okay. Well, thank you all again. George's information will be at the bottom of this video. Go on his website.
Man, I just thought of something.
Yes, go ahead. Close us out.
I want to say to those listening, have the courage to stand up for God, and especially for these kids, because it's the young children who are being targeted. And if you could stop for a moment and take it from someone who lived in that life for 25 years, and I've seen the devastation. If you can't do anything else, think about these small children whose minds are going to be destroyed. And eventually they're going to grow up and they're going to be so confused. And I'm saying, fight for the kids and do what is right. Don't worry about being liked and loved and appreciated. That is not your job. Stand up for these children and do what is right in God's eyes. So when you stand before him, he can count you as someone who really did care to stand up for the truth. Be bold.
Be bold, because who knows, maybe God has raised you up for such a time as this. Thank you, George.
Thank you for having me on the show.
For such a time as this.